Hello, this is Eric Bobrow, and in this ArchiCAD video tutorial we continue our exploration of the use of IFC fields and interactive schedules to speed up, automate, and extend your ArchiCAD workflow, intelligently leveraging your BIM data for automatic labeling of building elements on drawings, as well as the generation of detailed specification reports. This is part 2 of a 4-part series. Let's start with a quick review of the first tutorial. In the first video of this series, we learned how to create special IFC fields to specify and record information about building elements regardless of type: walls, windows, generic elements, as well as library parts. We added drawing notes with the label tool based on this data, associative labels that update if there are any changes. We created and generated a specifications report schedule with notes and descriptions based on the same data. And we set up some label favorites in a variety of annotation styles. Let's take a quick review visually. Here's a simple little project, and in this section we can see some labels. When I hover over a label like this one here, you can see that ArchiCAD shows that it's linked to the roof. When I select the roof here and we go to tags and categories, we'll see the note Spanish tile and the R01 are actually part of the roof, not manually placed into the label. In the same way, when I select the wall and look at it, we have the wall type here. Now if I eyedrop the label here and go back to the floor plan and then go say that I'd like to label that roof, you can see that it gets the same information. But the label is really looking at the information for the element. So for example, when I hover over the wall and click, you can see how it automatically places the information about the wall. Now, in the same way as when we have schedules for doors and windows, etc., we can have a specifications report which can report on all different types of elements. And this is where the IFC fields become supremely important, because being able to have things like drawing notes and descriptions in a schedule is only possible when you use these IFC fields, since they span building elements such as library parts, doors, and windows, as well as generic parts such as roofs, slabs, and walls. Now we can look at these individually, or we can perhaps merge the uniform items so that all of the walls with the same type get merged here. And then if I click on it, just like in an interactive schedule for library parts, I can say show this to me on the plan, and you can see here are the 4 walls that have the same type. If I make a change here, for example, change this to wall type 2 and change the description, and let's just make it very simple, wall type 2, and perhaps change the ID label like this, what we're going to see is that the labels change here in the plan and section, and of course in the specifications report we'll see that they update as well. So that's the crux of this approach, using IFC data fields to be able to provide information such as the drawing note and description that can be used for labeling as well as reporting. Now in this video we're going to be continuing on from the first tutorial. I'll show you how to add more IFC fields for different types of information, including categories, costs, and web links. We'll define categories on a single level or a multi-level hierarchy, so we can schedule by trade or category, or using CSI divisions and subdivisions. We'll also create special purpose schedules to edit element information to simplify and speed up the workflow, and I'll share some of my favorite tips and tricks. Let's get started. We're going to add a category to our IFC fields. In order to do this, we're going to go back to the floor plan, because you need to be on the floor plan in order to access the command under the File menu, File Special, IFC 2x3, IFC Scheme Setup. This is where we have access to the schemes that are used in this project, and where we can, for example, add to the fields that are available. And as I showed in the first tutorial, things are inherited. So for example, when I define some fields like the description and drawing note in the IFC element, it's available then for the building elements, the beams, etc. You can see these are blue here, whereas at this level, the IFC element, they're being defined. So I'm going to go in and add a new property or classification under that same property set name, which is basically a grouping method, and we'll call this category here. And we'll look at property types and value types later, but right now we're simply going to add one more field for category, and you can see it shows up here alphabetically. I say OK, and now let's go and start adding categories to these elements. I'm going to select with the arrow tool just simply the roof and the 4 exterior walls here, and we'll open up the tags and categories. We can see some information about the last selected elements, that they have a description and a drawing note, but we don't have access to the categories or the new field called category. If I open up the wall settings, we'll see that there's the Manage IFC Properties, which we looked at earlier. I can click on that, and under BCG there's now this field called category. If I click and I put something in, let's say exterior shell as a category, and say OK, then you can see that it has that information. And if I go back in, you'll see that it actually has added in a check mark here. So I don't have to check it separately. I can just put in that information. And by the way, you can adjust the size of this window so you can see this information more easily. And you have a lot of text, room for text here. It goes, I think, to 255 characters, so quite a bit. Now, I just did the walls. Let's just select that roof and see if that actually added that information in. No, it did not. So, in fact, in this context here, in the element settings dialog or the wall settings or the info box, we can only access and change the IFC properties for elements of the same type. So I need to go here and put in the same information, exterior shell. I think that's what I said. Let's see, this is exterior shell, and we'll see this one, exterior shell. So the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm going to go now and add a refinement to the schedule. So here we have, under our schedules, I have the new schedule, which is specifications, and open that up. And in the scheme settings, I simply am going to add another field here. Now, in order to add this, I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the drawing note and description. Instead of clicking the Add button by itself, I'm going to click the little triangle and say Add IFC Properties, and then find the new one here. You notice that this was available. These two are gray because they're already included. So I'm going to add this, and I'm going to put it up at a higher level so that it becomes the main sort. So in other words, it'll sort things that have the same category together and then possibly separate them by type. So we'll say OK, and you can see now the schedule has gotten a little bit messy here because of the size of the header, and it now has category. Now you can see the elements that say exterior shell are grouped together. These other ones don't have a name. So let's go and just modify all of these. Now, in order to modify all of these together, what we can do is simply take out some of the information. We can have another scheme, for example, like this. I'm going to go create a new one, and we'll go and duplicate this, and we'll say specifications setup. Now I'm going to do something here, we'll call this spec 2, that is a little bit extreme, but I'm going to show you a more practical example of this later. So in this case, I'm going to say that everything that's in a certain category is going to be grouped, and but we're going to actually remove the other information. So I'm going to say remove these other things. So now this particular specification setup will only have the category and the type. And when I say OK, we'll see that this, just widen this up here, that there's elements that say exterior shell and these elements that say the type. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to actually turn off the show headline so that the category here is available. So this checkbox I turn off, and we'll go here and I'll just call this openings, and we'll copy that and openings. And then for the slab and the interior walls, let's just call this interior and interior. All right, so now I've gone by element type and just categorized these elements. Now if I go and say show headline, you can see how it resorts. Let's see, that window did not quite get there. Let's say show headline, the window openings. Oh, maybe this just has to rebuild. So let's go to the view menu, refresh, rebuild. And here, now we have the openings grouped together. So it had to think about it to reorganize it. So now I've got some categories that may be a little bit arbitrary, but you get the idea that you can actually group these things. Now if I go back to the scheme settings and go back to the specifications, remember I've added the category, and now when I say OK, we have the full information that we've at least built out so far grouped by category. So we can manually change the category of these elements, selecting them on the plan or in 3D, but we can also do it using a special purpose schedule that allows us to select things in a group. And I'll show you a few variations of this that I've developed for master template in a moment. Now let's look at a couple of actual examples. If we go over to Tim Ball's project, you can see that there's a category called C2 alterations. So the C2 is a part of the CAWS, or Common Arrangement of Work schedule. I'm not quite sure the meaning of the acronym or the origin of the acronym, but it's a way of organizing work that's common in the UK. So it's under alterations, and when I flip through to look at following pages, you can see here is F, masonry. So this is a category for the trade. And here's G2, carpentry, and H6, roof. So basically he's got all of his building elements grouped by a trade category. Now in the US, it's common to organize things with a CSI, or Construction Specifications Institute, I think is what it refers to, CSI division and subdivision. So a division, 07, thermal and moisture protection, with a subdivision, in this case related to roofing. So this tiny little example project only has a few elements. You can see the headline here refers to the main division, and here is the category or subdivision. And here under openings we have the 810 doors and frames and 850 windows, so these are grouped under here. Now you notice that when I have this selected, that instead of having this big wide space here, which doesn't really do us any good, that I had a very narrow one. We can simply, once we have a headline, we can simply make this narrower like this. Now the problem with that is that the headline here gets messed up, but I can simply go into the headline, and we can change the name of the headline simply by editing it like this, but we can actually take it out entirely by putting in a single space or a dot. So if I do a space here and then make this narrow, you can see how we're still editing this, and that's why it's got the color, but it actually is blank. So that's a little trick there, is that you can change the heading for or the column head to be a blank, and it's still referring to this. If I say don't show headline, you can see that, let's see, then that text becomes a mess, but you can see this is blank. If I say show the headline, you can see that this is blank, and I can now make it narrow. So that's a nice little trick there. Now, in terms of the in master template, what we've got set up for the scheme settings is we have a division and a category in CSI field. So it's very easy, just to add one more level, and you can then specify element divisions and categories. And if we want, in addition to doing the headline as just a single overall division, we could, in cases of where you have a very long schedule, we could group it by the first two elements. So we could go to the settings for the headline and say that we're going to take the first two schedule fields as the heading. And then you can see that it's grouping this way. Now, the format of this, in terms of having 08 openings, 0810 doors and frames, is maybe not ideal, but it still will group it nicely. You can see that there is the 08 openings, 0810 doors and frames, and the 0850 windows all grouped together. So this is a maybe not quite perfect, but certainly gives a very well organized schedule here. So I'll put this back to just doing the first schedule field. Now, in master template, which we sell commercially to any ArchiCAD user who'd like to take advantage of a well-defined Office standard template, we've got many different schedules set up for management purposes. So if I go down and scroll to the schedule list, you can see that there are many schedules that have a special code here for setup and for templates, and as well as many schedules that are ready to go right out of the box for your use. Now let's take a look at one of these that I call list divisions and categories. So if I double click on that, we'll see that what it does is it simply summarizes all of the divisions that are currently included in the file. So these are the ones that we saw earlier with the 08 openings, 0850 windows, etc. Now this is useful because you can actually put a list of all of these divisions or categories onto a sheet as a reference. You can also see if perhaps sometimes things were made with similar names but not exactly the same. For example, it could say 0850 window with a singular versus windows. These would then show up in two different groups. But what we can do here is we can literally go here and edit this. So if we had the window and windows, two separate lines, we could change one of them to match the other, and then it would combine them all. So it would get them all cleaned up. So we can also see that some elements have no division or category, or have a category but no division. So for example, the 1028 toilet, bath, and laundry accessories, I can go in here and say what those are. Now I'm just going to call this 10 residential equipment. I'm not sure what it should be, but let's just say that that's the overall one that it should be. Now when I've done that, if I rebuild here, we'll see that now it sorts properly into the main division. Now all of the elements that were referred to in the project will also pick that information up. This is in fact affecting all of the elements in the project. If we go to the scheme settings, it's saying the element types, all types. So all elements will have this information, all the ones that were in this toilet, bath, and laundry accessories. So this is a great quick way to clean things up. Now let's look at some other ones that have been set up for management purposes. So for example, this one, and we'll just close this up here, this is organized by layer. So in some cases we can say, for example, that all walls on the exterior should be put into some major division. So basically all the elements on a layer perhaps can be simplified to put into a particular category or division. Now later you can go and edit individual ones and say, no, this is a special case, but this is a very quick way of organizing things. So when you're taking your project from the point where you've modeled it and started to do some basic annotation and you want to actually do the specifications, you can bring up this schedule where it's organized by layer and put in the division and category, or if you have a simpler case, just the category. Now let's go into the next one here. We'll close this up. This is for windows and doors. Now the reason why this is separate is that the windows and doors probably are going to be organized separately from the walls that they're part of, and you can't really, if you included the windows and doors in the earlier schedule, then they would all get set up with the same category. The way this is done under the scheme settings is that I'm saying that it's only windows and doors, and then we're listing them by the layer of the wall that they're part of. Whereas the one that I looked at a moment here is saying don't list the windows and doors, do all the other element types except for that. So that's why this is separated. Now sometimes you need to go into a single layer where maybe it's a layer for furniture, or a layer for landscape, or a layer for equipment, and we can then say this particular one we want to go and specify this maybe by type. So if I say OK, and let's go in here, say the layer is something else, so I'll pick a layer, wall exterior. So we can use this particular one and modify the layer as needed. And you can see that on this layer we've got certain element types, and we can then go in and specify some information about them. So you could go through your project on individual layers and very quickly categorize these elements into their division and category. So again, a schedule specifically for managing the information. Now let's go into the next one here, where we're listing the elements that have no division or category. So this is all individual. This is basically allowing us to see on a layer a specific type of element with some reference ID that either was put in automatically or perhaps manually by the designer. And then we can go in and put the division and category. So this lists everything essentially that hasn't been categorized, and we can go through that. We can also select it. Of course, we can select this here and say, show it to me on the plan, and then work with it. So this is one way to do it sort of bit by bit, and it will group things like all the beams that have a particular reference number will all be grouped. But let's look at something that is a really cool little trick. Actually, one more thing is there are going to be some that you may not want to include in the schedule, and the way that Tim Ball refers to it is these are the ones you don't want pricing information from the contractor. Maybe they're furniture that's going to be supplied after the fact, or landscaping, things that just are for ornamental purposes but do not play a role in the schedule. So we can put in, for example, to a category a particular code like the letter X. And then in the other ones, in the main specifications, we can say the category is not X, and therefore we're only going to include ones that we want. So this is a way to a criteria that can include or not include elements. Now here's one trick that I want to show you that is really cool, because it will list everything that does not have a category or division here. So you can see all these divisions are blank, and we can go into scheme settings, and it says it either doesn't have a category or it doesn't have a division, and it has a lot of the information here. Now why would you want to have just the elements without a division or a category? Well, let's look at these interior walls. If I highlight this and say show me these interior walls. You can see these two interior walls do not have a division or category. If I go to the tags and categories here, you'll see I have put in some information, but there's nothing about the division or category. Notice that there's no way to put in the division or category in the tags and categories here because those fields haven't been defined yet. I have to go into the settings dialog and then the manage IFC properties in order to manually, after multiple steps here, go and put in the division and category. So to get access to this, I have to select the elements, go into the settings, and then go in through a couple of dialog boxes to get there. So what I've found is that in this schedule here, if we go in, for example, and just put a space, just a single space character here, and the same perhaps with the division, what it's going to do is it's going to add that character, the space, to the division and category. Now if I select these here on the plan and I go to tags and categories, you see category and division is now available. It has a single space character, but I can go in and say category interiors. So I'm just being a little arbitrary for this, but basically by using that special schedule, we can select all the elements that do not have a division or category and add in some default ones. In fact, we could do that globally and just add in spaces for all of these elements, and then when you select any element, it just becomes so easy to hit tags and categories and put in the proper information. So a great time saver. So as a quick recap, in this tutorial we added some new IFC fields for different types of information. We looked at creating categories on a single level as well as multiple levels to organize your schedules, and we created some special purpose schedules to edit the element information to simplify and speed up the workflow, along with some additional tips and tricks. In the next tutorial in this series, I'll show you how you can add clickable web links as an option in some schedules and labels to describe or reference information about your building elements. We'll use a link shortener to provide a short version of the URL for these web pages or PDF documents, and we'll create durable, reliable web links for these construction document references using Dropbox. We'll add a cost field that can be used as part of budgeting, and we'll learn a few variations of IFC mapping to pull precise current BIM information into your associative labels. Please add your comments and questions to the page down below this video. This has been Eric Bobrow. I'll be back soon with more. Thanks for watching.